Hello, everyone, and welcome to Future Nonprofit, a podcast and YouTube channel where we sit down with industry experts, both in and out of the nonprofit space, to talk about how to build and scale the nonprofits our world needs tomorrow. I'm your host, Ted Vaughn, the co-author of Culture Built My Brand and the co-founder of Historic Agency. If you have not yet checked out the audio version of Future Nonprofit, it is a highly produced, amazing 20 to 30-minute journey through each of our guests' stories. Be sure and check that out. Like and follow us wherever you get your podcasts or here on YouTube. And I hope you really enjoyed today's episode. We talked to some amazing people. You speak a lot, so might be easier for you to answer. But if you had to have one piece of music that accompanies you in any speaking engagement, when you walk out, this is your walkout piece of music.
You know, it's funny. I have had a few opportunities where I was asked what piece of music would play while I came on stage. And it's super fun because the first time that happened, I was like, oh, what would it be? And then I just thought about, we had this really fun culture when I was leading the AI team at Donor Search. And when payday would end up on a Friday, so we were paid every other week. So it was like payday Fridays were like a special deal. We would play a song together on our AI team, super nerdy AI team. And we would play it. Everybody would sit and listen to it and watch a video. And it's called Prisen Kollen Einsen Kuzal. And I don't know if you've ever heard of the song. You've definitely heard of the song. It would be in like a Heineken commercial. It was actually in the Super Bowl ad this last year. It was developed in like the 1960s, I think 60s or early 70s, by this Italian artist who his rise to fame basically started to believe that words did not matter, that people could be moved by music no matter if the words were real or not real. And so his Italian artist, he made this entire song based on made-up words that sounded kind of like American pop, but it's complete nonsense, and it has the best beat. It literally is like you cannot listen to the song and not start bobbing your head and doing this thing. So you'll have to check it out. And it turns out that, we never ran out of parody videos of the song. So like people would like redo the music video with this song with their kids or with their dorm or there's just so many. There's probably, I think we saw at least 50 different remakes of this music video to the song on YouTube. It literally it's a bottomless pit. So if you ever have some Saturday that, it's raining outside and you don't know what to do, go for it. But it's pretty amazing.
That probably is the most unusual, best answer I've had to that question. Usually they struggle for can I say this? It's a hip hop song. Okay, last icebreaker question. If you had to explain to a 5-year-old in like one easy sentence what you do for a living, what would your description be?
That's way harder. It's probably similar to what my wife thinks I do every day, which is you spend a lot of time in airports and you talk to people. That's probably the basis of it. And it feels like that most of the time, and probably in that order. Spend lots of time in airports and then I talk to people. So, I think to a non-lay audience, as a chief AI officer, in a lot of ways, I'm like an AI conscience for an organization. Just because we can do something doesn't mean we should. But my wife doesn't even really get that part.
Interesting. Yeah, no, that's funny. I think the airport and talking to people be a lot of alignment with that. If you had though, just to press on that a little further, but then if the 4-year-old said, yeah, but what do you talk to them about? What would your super simple answer to that be?
Yeah, it's probably not that hard for me to think in that. I tend to think in t-shirts. I don't know what it is. I started out as a business major. I was a dual business marketing major. In fact, I never wanted to be a nonprofit. I decided I wanted to go work on Madison Avenue. I loved brands and ads. But, that the t-shirt kind of scenario is always helpful for me because it sums it up. And it is the thing I just shared, which is just because you can do something doesn't mean you should. So that's probably one of the most consistent themes that I talk about. So while people would assume I'm an AI evangelist, I'm actually not. I'm a responsible, beneficial AI evangelist. I believe in the power of AI to amplify impact and mission, but I also believe that it has the power to destroy the essence of humanity if we allow it. And so I'm kind of on this crusade to ensure that people are aware that this tool will be a reflection of humanity and that it's up to us in our agency and how we decide to use that tool. I think that's it. I think that idea of just because you can doesn't mean you should sounds really easy and is actually really hard, especially when you're presented with things that make your life easier. I mean, think about, if I ask you, how much do you trust Mark Zuckerberg? You don't have to answer it, but probably not a lot. I've done this with like a lot of audiences. And then the second question is, how many of you use any Facebook product, which is, Instagram or Facebook or anything? And right, a lot. So we trade convenience for privacy all the time. And there'll be a point where your values as an individual matter more than they've ever mattered. And that those values are what help allow you to ask that and answer that question. Just because I can doesn't mean I should. And so that's really my crusade for the most part. And so that's the part that feels good. Maybe not always the most popular thing, but it feels good to do.
All right. I want to move to story of origin. So one of the interesting trends I found in anybody working in this space of impact nonprofit, and I know you weren't necessarily designed for that when you were thinking about your career path, but you're there now. There's almost always somebody, a coach, a teacher, a parent, somebody who modeled something, somebody who helped somebody in a time of crisis. There's somebody in the story of origin that is the conscience or the voice in their ear or the influence that's inspiring them today. If you were to kind of comb through your past, your story of origin, who's that for you today? Who's the person whose voice is still ringing in your head, informing how you show up or what you do today to make the world better?
I think really two formative characters in my life. My mom, who worked, I grew up in poverty. My mom worked 3 jobs. I had an older sister who's 5 years old. So 5 years older than I am. So she kind of helped take care of me while my mom was working. But while we grew up in poverty, my mom really instilled a sense at a very young age that, generosity and what you could give wasn't related to how much money you had. And so my earliest memories, I did my first fundraiser when I was 8 years old because I had a friend who she was my friend that she almost drowned in a swimming pool, ended up with a lot of medical bills for the family. And my mom was like, well, you can do something about it. It's all about agency. And I hosted outside of the Straw Hat Pizza in Simi Valley, California. Somehow the newspaper ended up taking a photo of it and I ended up in the newspaper. So that, that really was formative in terms of this idea that generosity is a state of mind. It's not related to how much money you have. And then my father-in-law, who's now passed, I started dating my wife in high school. He was a clinician, started a free clinic. He actually started the Boys and Girls Sub that I went to when I was a kid. Didn't know that, just weird, kind of circles and stories and spiderweb of life. But he ended up selling his medical practice later on in life and ended up traveling the world. About 10 months a year he spent in places like Nigeria and Pakistan and Afghanistan doing polio eradication and risking his life on the front lines of polio. And I really, really admired that aspect of, just, go for it. If you're called to do something, that you just need to do it. And it didn't matter what happened, but he was really a role model in this humanitarian aspect. And realized as a clinician, it didn't matter what medicine he had with him. It didn't matter, what medical advice he could provide them. If he could just hold their hand and show love to them, that he could see healing happen. And that was, really formative for me as well. So I think about him a lot and just how generous he was with his time and just that approach.
Connect the dots between a kid growing up with a mom who has this incredible mindset and posture of generosity despite, it sounds like, financial challenges and headwinds, and the father-in-law, which that was later in life, and yet you saw yourself heading to Madison Avenue, not into the nonprofit to do more good for more people and get on more newspapers to raise more money. Like, what did you want to do when you were growing up? Like, what was your, I wanted to be a stuntman because I watched Lee Majors in the TV show The Fall Guy. I love that show.
Amazing.
What did you want to be when you were growing up?
You're brave. Yeah, not something that risky. It's funny. I was always kind of an entrepreneur. I had 2 paper routes, because one wasn't enough, and of course they were all hills. And I remember, even up until in early high school, I ended up getting a subscription to Adweek and Brandweek, and they were really expensive. I mean, we're talking like back then, like I think it was like $35 a year or $40 a year per. Like that was a lot of money, paper route money that I was spending to like get these magazines that only like adults were reading. So, I don't know. I just really love the creative side of doing, of creating something that hadn't been created. So ads and brand were something that I don't know what I resonated with them. But I actually started 2 tech companies. So I was actually, as a young kid, I just loved taking things apart and putting them back together. And if I didn't know how to, I'd kind of just mess with it and figure it out. And then when technology came, even in high school, I, started tinkering with computers. I ended up starting a data storage company before Adobe PDF was even out. And then after that, I sold that company to my partner, ended up starting a first company to sell skis on the internet. And in 1996, 97. So that was super fun, right in the dot-com boom. And, and then I decided, you know what, I missed my calling. I want to go to Madison Avenue, and sold my second company to my partner, still runs it today, and took a year off and decided I was going to go to Madison Avenue, get my MBA, go to Madison Avenue, going to school. And at that time I was serving on a board of directors at a local Boys and Girls Club. And I was 22 or something. I was pretty young at the time, maybe 21. And my neighbor was the board chair. So that's how I got invited on. And the third board meeting I went to, the director quit. And it wasn't bad. She wasn't like, peace out, but she was moving to Idaho. And I was just young and naive and not working. And I was basically, I said, I'll kind of keep an eye on things if you want me to for a little while. 'Cause, I had plenty of time. And I had no idea. Like it was almost love at first sight. Like I started going into the Boys and Girls Club early in the morning, and I've shared the story before, but it still brings kind of goosebumps. But I think it was like my second or third week going into the Boys and Girls Club, 7 a.m. And I walk up and there's this kid named Charles sleeping on the porch. And it wasn't like a nice porch. It was like hard, cold tile in this, middle of this gang territory. And I was like, Charles, what are you doing here? And now Charles was a freshman at the time, and he was taking trigonometry and Japanese, type 1 diabetic. And he had a mom who was abusive and a drug addict. And he had gone home the night before, and she was in a rage. And he didn't know any other place to go except for this little cold porch that was kind of in this middle of this, kind of safe haven of 3 different gang territories, and slept there. And I had never thought about nonprofit being a career choice. I just thought, well, you work on Madison Avenue and then you give money to nonprofits or you volunteer to nonprofits. Never, ever, ever considered that it actually could be a career decision. But I mean, if I look at that, I spent 7 years at that club, and I grew up from 1 club to 10 clubs by the time I left, and I did consulting with Boys and Girls of America by the end. And it was just by sheer opportunity and chance and divine intervention that I ended up there. And then I was open to that path. And then I just kept on following the thread, and the thread led to a 20-year career of leading nonprofits, and then to bookend that back into technology. So, it's kind of an amazing career ride where I've got to experience and walk in the shoes, in the nonprofit shoes, and have a lot of empathy for that role, but then also be a technologist and think about how does the future of technology allow us to ideally amplify mission and impact in ways that were never before imaginable.
And Nathan, I find that some people's career is this very planned, intentional, linear journey. Like my wife wanted to be this. She set out on that path. Slight course correction took her this way, but then it was legal, so she went down the lawyer path and continued to go. Very linear. Other people, like myself, just tripping and stumbling your way forward and reacting. You never quite know necessarily what you'll be doing a year from now, and but you figure it out. And if you have that kind of humility and hustle and people smarts, to quote Lencioni, you tend to do okay. It sounds like that's more of your journey. But today, looking forward at this point in your career, do you see a more linear path, or do you feel like it's going to be the same adventure you've been on?
Yeah, well, the future won't reward a linear path, and for sure, so we're in a very turbulent kind of dynamic type of environment where dot connectors, Renaissance people, dot connectors, curious generalists that I talk about a lot, will have their day, right? Because, for most of my career and growing up, to be honest, I felt like I was a little bit of a fish out of water. I mean, I was in high level roles with really smart people in higher education, in the university level where all these people are smarter than me. I was kind of this Renaissance dot connector, and I just didn't really feel like I fit in. And I think about this now, and even, I have a son who's insanely intelligent. I mean, he finished undergrad in 3 years with a perfect GPA and his master's in 1 year with a perfect GPA. And I woke up at 3 a.m. thinking, oh my gosh, I need to text him. We need to have breakfast, because I realized that, this is a year ago or so, in the world where intelligence is democratized, like intelligence becomes a commodity of all commodities. It's entirely free and abundant and PhD level intelligence for every single person on the planet, that being smart will no longer get you there. You have to be smart and super adaptable. And in some ways, it's easier to not be smart and not hold on to just that raw intelligence and just be super adaptable. So, yeah, I don't see my career at all being linear. I think I look for threads and kind of disparate. I listen to chatter. I think about relevancy a lot, like way more than I probably should. I think about relevancy for myself a lot. And in the age of AI, how do I stay ahead? And that's kind of what drives my kind of neurotic, quest for like what's next. But, for now, I mean, for now it's like staying ahead, and there's no longer staying a few steps ahead. It's staying one step ahead, and then, exercising that entrepreneurial spirit. And I mean, I feel like in the future, everyone's an entrepreneur, because you can create anything you want. And that's a blessing and a curse. So the curse is that it can lead to tons of overwhelm because everything is possible now. But yeah, I can't imagine a linear path. I don't even know what that would look like. I think one thing that we're sure about is that we're really bad at predicting the future.
Well said. That's great. Just one last question, just kind of going back to story of origin for a moment. To what extent has you had mentioned growing up in some degree of financial hardship. I think you used the word poverty. To what extent has that informed the entrepreneurial, that sense of like I grew up in a similar place, and I have realized recently, gotten more and more in touch with there's a part of me driven that I'm often not in touch with, to not have that situation happen again. So there's an entrepreneurial, in its unredeemed aspects, fear, panic, drive. In the redeemed side, it's hustle, hard work.
Yeah, exactly.
Do you relate to that? How cognizant or real is that for you?
Yeah, entirely. Yeah, I face both demons all the time. So there's the scarcity side, the fear of, that's even the fear of relevancy, and the fear, because that relates to like stability. So I have this unhealthy to this day, unhealthy fear of like, I could be replaced and then what happens? And so there's a lot of things you internalize as a kid where, this is going around. You don't really know that you're poor as much as, I mean, we were in the food lines and, and Christmas in the line for presents and things, but it didn't feel like punitive. It just felt like life. Looking back, I'm like, you never want that for your kids. And so I have this unhealthy, thing. And it's funny because actually I had a coaching session with Claude the other day. I was like analyzing some of this like relevancy. I wrote an article on relevancy and it was very reaffirming to me, and like, you've actually done these things and, you're going to be okay. And it's impossible for me. Even friends will say, I know you won't believe me when I say this, but you're fine, kind of thing. Part of that, channeled well is a driving force, right? Channeled well and in a non-debilitating way is the thing that like it takes an idea to action. And then to your other part, I mean, I realized like my dad abandoned us when we were little, and I thought that was such a detriment. But what it did is it taught me that I was the man of the house. My mom, my sister, and I, If there was a plumbing issue, I fixed a pipe. If there was something, electrical in the attic, I went up in the attic and I became very handy because of that. But also, like, I just learned that I could do more. Like, I mean, I can just fix things and I could like jump in and just figure it out. And that's carried me really well through I've not ever really been afraid of like, oh, I don't understand. I mean, back in 2017, I didn't understand anything about AI. And I just found like really smart people around me and I became super annoying and I asked them a million questions. And so that part of growing up in poverty, I think, if channeled well, you can just have this like thirst for like, in the inquisitiveness of like, yeah, but if I have agency to do something about it, then you just become really curious and you keep on exercising that.
I love that you live in the tension of both aware of the story of origin aspects that have shaped parts of who you are, but then also the redemptive side of that, which is becoming, redeeming the trauma or the challenge in a way that then leads to, I mean, in many ways, greatness, opportunity, right? I mean, it's out of great challenge and pain that often our superpowers are born.
Right. That separates, I mean, it even separates in people that your friends or people that you hire, that you manage, those that decide to consciously learn from a circumstance versus those that continue to make the same mistake or become a victim of a circumstance. I mean, that's truly what separates. I mean, I have the same circumstance as a lot of people, and luck plays into different aspects of it. Like get introduced to the right people, the right time. But, to me, it was definitely about hustle and grit and that scrappiness that you learn by growing up on the other side of the tracks, that if you want something, you're going to have to make it happen. And if you allow that to be a channel, a force multiplier, like basically my superpower throughout most of my career is I could work harder than anyone else. That basically, I mean, that was not sexy, but I could work harder than anyone else because that's how I was raised. And that's what I was taught, So, I mean, I just got ahead by not by intelligence for sure. It was just by sheer grit.
I want to talk a little bit about the context we're in today in a few ways. First, the nonprofit as a entity, as a institution, seems to not be held up as highly regarded as it once was. You talk to most Gen Zs or millennials, and it's like the nonprofit isn't this holy place that it was perhaps for our grandparents or our parents. And so the nonprofit is competing in the rest of the world, the same world, without any type of unfair advantage that perhaps it used to have. That's at least my observation. I'm curious, do you agree that the nonprofit, in terms of how people perceive it, is losing esteem or losing its once elevated status in society?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I spent 20 years fundraising, and when I started fundraising, 2/3 of Americans gave to 501c3 nonprofits. So, I mean, at the time, we talked about the great wealth transfer, and this is going to be the best, the best days were ahead of us. I didn't realize that the best days were already behind us. So, I go from, this point where I could go into any Starbucks and 2 out of 3 people could tell me who their favorite charity was and why, to 20 years later, realizing, this one humbling moment. I look back in horror because this moment that I spent with one of my prospect researchers on my team, we spent an entire day talking about how to build a better mousetrap. And I didn't realize until about 2 or 3 years later when I was writing The Generosity Crisis that I spent an entire day talking about donors as mice. And it didn't seem wrong. It just seemed like a condition of our circumstances. And so we go from 2/3 of Americans giving down to, now 46.8% of Americans give to charity. I mean, it's not a feeling that things are changing. I mean, the data supports this. And to be honest, I tried to get many people to write a book called The Generosity Crisis because I felt it, and the recognition that I worked 50, 60, 70 hours a week, like working in a nonprofit, especially a small nonprofit, is not a job. It's a way of life. Like, I mean, it can be an incredible way of life, right? And it's something that you just wear on your sleeve everywhere you go, but it's hard. And there's some that when I was thinking about the math at one point, I'm like, I spent 50, 60, 70 hours a week on this job for 20 years and my job never got easier. Like how does that math work? Because at a certain point you would have thought that like my job would have got easier. The reason it didn't get easier is because basically the data was not supportive, right? So less and less Americans were giving to 501c3 nonprofits, but at the same time, the rise of giving vehicles like GoFundMe and other types of, peer-to-peer things were cropping up because people wanted to make an impact. To be honest, I don't really necessarily believe there's a generosity crisis. I believe that the way we define generosity and charitable giving, that in that sense the data is not positive, but that people are born. I mean, we're pro-social beings. Like we are born to give and to be in community with others. This is why your brain releases dopamine and serotonin. But there are more vehicles to give now than ever. And if at this point a nonprofit can't be an amplifier of a person's generosity, then it's a barrier of a person's generosity. If I have this sense I want to make a gift, I can make an immediate impact through GoFundMe. I get my hit of dopamine and serotonin, but I gave to a nonprofit and I didn't hear back or I didn't have that same hit, then, why would I continue to do that?
So the second context observation I'm curious to get your thoughts on, it seems like the for-profit space is quickly learning and now surpassing the nonprofit space in competing on mission. It's philanthrocapitalism, Tony's, Chocolonely, Patagonia, all the classic brands that have tapped into mission, that the dopamine, the sense of making the world better, we're giving younger generations the option to be on mission for social impact and to make the world better and still get the things and the brands that they so want to be shaped by. Their identity is shaped by Docs. People wear Doc Martens not because they're the best boot, because of what it says about them. If Doc taps into mission and making the world better, they're going to amplify their product sales even further. That landscape seems to be making it even harder for the nonprofit space to succeed.
Yeah, absolutely. It wasn't in the first book specifically, but it came out, after the book came out, I went on this like world book tour and I met with, around 10,000 nonprofit professionals, did lots of workshops and leaders and, and it was interesting how I think most nonprofits still feel like they're in the business of raising money. And they don't realize until you kind of slap them in the face that they're not. They're in the business of building connection. And guess who also is in the business of building connection? Like every brand that you just mentioned. And they put lots of R&D around it. It's psychological warfare. It's truly a competition for connection, not a competition for dollars. And so, to sum that up, I feel like nonprofits are playing the wrong game. Most nonprofits are playing the wrong game. And the incredible thing about it is that nonprofits have the antidote to all of this. They don't have to make people feel that they're part of a community because they are, by definition, by their bylaws, they are the community. And so I think there is this opportunity, and this is where, I still remain an optimist in the human sense of like, even if I'm wrong, I have to die trying, but that nonprofits showed us during COVID, they knew what to do. They did radical things to draw people in, the things that were super unconventional and not popular. And like they hosted an event, but they didn't ask for money, like crazy, wild things. And guess what? We saw the data reverse for a 2-year period. We saw the trends go up. More people gave. And then the sad part of that is that, after things stabilized, we went back into that more transactional way. So the hopeful part is we know better. We've actually proven that it can work, but we've fallen back into victim of just doing things the way we've always done them and expecting a different result or just work a little bit harder.
Yeah, there's this interesting tension for me. I work with many nonprofits who are afraid to spend money, right? They would rather raise $5 million by keeping it 15% overhead than raise $50 million if they double their overhead, right? It's like, it just doesn't make sense. It's like, if you really believe in the cause, then the overhead becomes less important if you can actually make a measurable impact on the cause. Like the goal is to put ourselves out of business, not to keep our overhead low.
Right.
So there's that reality, but then there's the other reality. So they're afraid to spend money, but then I've never met any sector or organization that has more zombie, my buddy Jim Moriarty calls them zombie programs, zombie brands, zombie. It's like they're totally dead, but they keep them alive because somebody likes them, which is so inefficient. Like the tension of that to me is amazing.
Yeah, no, I see it all the time. And I think, while there's a lot of extreme examples, I mean, and this is where I think people get caught in this like bioptic kind of view of this, is that you have Dan Plata on one side saying, well, you should just pay anyone any amount of money because if you have a net positive, then it's good for all of humanity. And then you have the reality of a nonprofit who, if we do this thing and it fails, this total scarcity mindset, then there's like children that will, we won't be able to feed. The challenge with it is that in both those cases, the measurement of success is money. And, I think about it from my nonprofit lens. If I didn't in running, leading nonprofits for a long time, and for me, most of my career, revenue and expenses were basically how I kept my job. Fill the leaky bucket, keep your expense ratio, in check, and then you keep your job. And that's it, that plays a game that never ends, and it just never ends well. It ends up in this like vicious cycle of building a better mousetrap. The reality is that if you didn't have revenue goals, but you had your goals and your KPIs or OKRs were built on lifetime value, increasing net lifetime value, just like no revenue goals, no expense goals, like our entire premise of life is to increase the number of people that we have in our tribe, and that increases every year, and those people are moving up. That is the true measurement of success. This is where boards have to really hear this. And no board, I've never met a board member that goes to a board meeting thinking, I want to do harm to this organization. They don't, that's not their primary objective. But by asking first and foremost, how much revenue do we have? And then what is our expense ratio? Essentially, they're just making that hamster wheel go faster and faster. And that leads, of course, to all the things, decline in charitable participation and burnout and all the things that are related to that systemic issue. So I think it really is a reframing of what success looks like. And back to that idea is that you're not actually in the business of raising money, you're in the business of building connection. So tap into that deep sense that people now more than ever, like this is like, I believe that community is a growth industry, authenticity is a growth industry. So whether you're a pastor or whether you are a nonprofit leader, this is a time where people are going to seek that desire to feel connected to something that's real and pure and true. And guess what? Nonprofits are the antidote to that if they allow it and kind of, slow down all this craziness they're doing on one side to actually get back to the sense of, what they actually intend to do.
One part of me loves this idea that we're not in the business of money, we're in the business of connection. That, yes, absolutely. That is a better step in the right direction. But there's a part of me, maybe because I'm just so cause, mission, purpose. I want to say, no. We're in the business of actually solving the problem we're called to solve. Like I'm not pushing back, but maybe I am. Like how, would you say that we're in the business of connection in order to, like, there always needs to be that bigger thing that I think orientates us or informs our mindset?
Yeah, I would not disagree with that. In context of money versus like, you're not in the business of raising money, you're in the business of building impact and scaling impact. So that obviously has to be first and foremost. But instead of that focus of achieving that impact being money primarily, it needs to be engagement. It needs to be, connectedness. It needs to be, bringing people along with you. We framed in our entire book basically a new way of a reframing association and affiliation, where for 100 years, from Alexis de Tocqueville up until the age of the internet, association affiliation mattered a lot. Like having a brand in your local town of like a Red Cross or a guild or something, a Rotary Club, a Lions Club, Optimist Club, those are things that like everyone knew that you were a member of that those associations mattered a ton. And then we move into the subscription economy. Everything is very temporary, and the internet just changed all of this. So all of a sudden, it wasn't just like a single or primary identity. It's just like you have access to the world's information, and that became diffused. I mean, when we look back in time, very quickly how those kind of affiliations and associations diminished, like almost dissipated, almost, in context of history overnight, to a point where those, association and affiliation matter differently now. And so we created a new framework for radical connection, which is that deeper, more visceral sense of connectedness, which is I know you and you know me. And again, going back to the thing that nonprofits' inherent superpower is that they are the community. They've proven during COVID that they know how to do this. So if we just kind of like reassess and have some really honest conversations within our organizations and our boards, then, there's, I think, a lot of upside in this new age.
Yeah, amen to that. One of the early brands we spoke with on Future Nonprofit, good friend Jared of $4, he's this just massive brand of alleviating medical debt, and he's tapped into that idea of connection and community just simply through how he shows up and facilitates dialogue and connection on LinkedIn and other platforms. And it doesn't have to be this expensive, hard, thing to do. It's how you it's your posture. It's how you show up.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. We just have so much information now. This is, I look back and like, were we ever capable of consuming all the world's information? Should we have all the world's information? I mean, if you think back, like, what did it feel like before we had a cell phone? Like, I mean, if you just like really, I mean, it's like, if you go back not that far in time, right? I mean, even consider, I mean, it's still not in context of history, but it's a short period of time where it's like, we have instant connectedness to everything. Someone asked a question the other day of like, if you could uninvent one thing, what would it be? And I literally, and it's probably blasphemous, I was like, I would uninvent the internet. And people are like, oh my gosh, that's insane. Are you crazy? Like all the things, like everything, the internet powers everything in humanity. I'm like, we got along just fine before it. Like, I mean, we lived a life that was rich and fulfilling. It was hard. But there is something about being connected to the entire world all at once. And, you see this with Gen Zs and the most connected generation, but the loneliest generation, and all the things that have come with that.
It's such an interesting statement coming from somebody who just wrote a book called Nonprofit AI, A Comprehensive Guide to Implementing Artificial Intelligence for Social Good.
Thought you might pick up on that.
I would burn it all down, damn it. But let's talk about that. Let's talk about, we have the benefit of actually having some hindsight with the internet that at least a little bit. I mean, it moves so fast, it's hard to know if there's ever time or room for hindsight. But there's certainly no foresight. What is it with AI that you believe would help us avoid some of the danger zones that we've created, or the speed bumps or the traps that we've fallen into with the internet? How do we avoid those things with AI when it's such an evolving, fast-moving, dynamic tool that it feels at times uncontrollable?
Yeah, it's really complex. So, and I'm an AI optimist, obviously, and I look back, and what I find for myself is, and other AI leaders, in fact, my neighbor is a chief AI officer. He has 45 acres and a dairy farm. I have 2 tractors, one of which is 1949 International Harvester, and I now planting 100,000 sunflowers in my, so I wrestle with the being like uber ultra connected and everything, and then needing to step away of all of it. It's a very present reality for AI leaders right now, and it will be a present reality for every human on the planet soon. Like, so we're just at the forefront of it. So we're finding very clear boundaries, and like journaling and turning off phones and creating a lot of discipline around that. The fortunate thing is that, not even the internet per se, more social media, the invention of social media, which from context was designed to bring people together. It was designed to make people money, but it was designed to make people money by bringing people together. So I could know about somebody and what they're doing, a pen pal in France or whatever, and have this total connectedness to all things. And that was amazing for about 12 minutes. And of course, 12 minutes later, we find that it has had all types of unintended consequences, like increases in anxiety and depression, and decreases in happiness, and increases in teen suicide. And those aren't necessarily because the technology facilitated that. It's the financial incentives that created the hook for the technology to do that became so pervasive that there was no other way. I mean, it's basically a harvesting of, it's a race to the bottom of the brainstem, as Tristan Harris and Asa Raskin would talk about, in The Social Dilemma. And now we're, past that. I mean, to like sheer kind of manipulation. If people aren't conscious of it and step away from it. Now, so I say that all to hopefully shed or maybe portray that we have hindsight. We have the ability to look at the unintended consequences and realize that nothing is, it's not binary, net positive or net negative. Is that technology, by how it's designed and by how it's built using incentives, will shape society in one direction or another. My hope is that we have that hindsight and we can make better decisions. Now, the nonprofit sector has this really interesting place where, and I wrote an article about this recently, is that my entire career, I kind of made fun of the nonprofit sector for being slow. It's like, oh my gosh, we're 5 years behind. And then someone would be, no way, we're 10 years behind. And we'd be like, yeah, it's the worst. And I've realized now, and this article I wrote recently was about this idea that might actually be the inherent superpower that nonprofits have, because the lack of financial incentives to scale at any cost don't exist, which means that the nonprofit sector is the only sector on the planet that can evaluate technology objectively. We're not just like, you've got to scale this thing. If you're Facebook or Meta, I guess, and you're X and you're OpenAI, you have to scale at any cost because the market will destroy you if it doesn't. In a matter of days, you'll be like vapor. The nonprofit sector, it's not slowness, it's deliberation, it's discernment, and it's the ability to say, hey, just because we can do this thing doesn't mean we have to. It doesn't. And not just if this thing is going to provide short-term gain, but have long-term harm or unintended consequences, then we shouldn't do it. I think that is like, I have so much faith and hope, and I'm putting a lot of a lot of my optimism in the nonprofit sector at this moment to basically use that discernment for good, because the future is not written. AI is being, it's our future every day is unfolding in one way or another. And I actually believe the nonprofit sector's ability to look at AI objectively, how it can, on one hand, amplify impact and mission in ways that were never before imaginable. Like scarcity mindset goes to infinity mindset. I mean, overnight. Like if you have technology that knows something about everything and can seemingly do anything, you go from scarcity mindset to infinity mindset. At the same time, you have the ability to look at the technology and ensure that humans are in the loop in every single way, and that will serve not just short-term gain, but long-term as well. That's the part that gets me super excited.
I love that perspective. I love that answer. I want to sharpen the pencil on leadership for a moment. I'm a big culture guy. Wrote a book with Mark called Culture Built My Brand, the intersection of leadership, culture, brand strategy. And if I were writing the book today, there'd be a whole section on tech and AI, but I didn't. And I wish I did. Maybe I'll have to do a, addendum.
Follow-up.
Or a follow-up. Yeah, whatever that's called. What do you believe are guiding principles, or what needs to be true of senior leaders today in nonprofits navigating this tech, this AI, all the things that you just said, all the opportunity? What does that mean for how we lead and the cultures we shape that might be guiding principles or thoughts on the macro?
Yeah, I mean, thanks for bringing that up, because I speak about this a lot. I'm actually speaking to a large university tomorrow to a group of leaders, because AI is not a technical revolution. It's a cultural revolution. And it's like the world's biggest change management thing. I mean, you've read the book, of course, Who Moved My Cheese? And that's novel. At now AI moved your cheese and it's never coming back. It's just gone. It's on Pluto or whatever, wherever it's at now. And I find for myself and a lot of leaders that come to me, someone used this analogy. It's like leaders have, for periods of long stability, like we've been leading in periods of stability where everything was based on incremental growth, right? It's like, oh, if you're successful, you can grow your team by 3% or 4% or 5% or whatever it is per year, and do all your kind of standard things. Now, you've been leading in black and white your entire life, and now all of a sudden you're asked to lead in the color purple, and you have a ton of team members, and team members are like, what does purple look like? And show us purple, and what do we do with purple? And what are all the possibilities of purple? And leaders are freaked. They're like freaked out. They're just like not sure what to do. And this is where like AI FOMO comes in. And the FOMO is like, how far am I behind? Am I relevant? I host dinners every month now. And over the last like 6 months, and one of the questions I have at these dinners, usually about 20 nonprofit leaders, is, what keeps you up at night? And the recurring theme that keeps on coming up from these leaders at dinner is relevancy. It's them, their own relevancy. Like, how do I know if I'm doing right for my organization? How do I know if my job will continue to exist? How do I know if I'm steering the team in the right way? And I think this is where leaders have to kind of embrace both the opportunity of what AI represents and also the potential for overwhelm. And that's a hard thing, like for leaders now. It's like, okay, like things are moving much, much faster than they ever have before. And there's no sign that it's slowing down. How do I lead my team in this culture, in this organization, to realize the potential and the opportunities that exist because we have a moral obligation to do that, to amplify our mission. At the same time, how do I protect my team from fatigue and overwhelm and anxiety and all those things that come with it? This is one of the most challenging times that you could lead an organization. But I think the one good part is that leaders do not have to be technologists. They don't. I think this is a fallacy. It's like, well, if I'm going to lead in the age of AI, I've got to understand all the things about AI. And they don't. They just need to, embrace a time of like adaptability. And it's, build what I call a culture of curiosity within their team. And then to really, harness that curiosity with a sense of urgency. Like, this is not something that we're going to do 5 years from now. This is something that we need to do now. The good thing about curiosity is it's entirely free, but it changes how you lead. I did not lead. I didn't hire people that were like really good question askers. I hired subject matter experts and I put them in a room and I'm like, don't talk to anybody and nobody talk to you and everything's going to great. You just do your thing because you're so good at it and, I trust you. And now hiring, the curious generalist, incentivizing curiosity and all the things that you do with, that culture of curiosity. You incentivize questions more than answers. You allow people to fail, allow people to experiment. You create safe circles where they can show what's working and what's not working with each other. I mean, that's super fun. If you're a leader who just wants to do things the same way, you're going to be really uncomfortable and you probably should just come over to my farm and grow sunflowers with me. But if you want to like go from like level 1 to level 10 within an organization, what's possible? I mean, I see some leaders rising to the challenge that are not technologists that are having a blast because they're doing things that have been locked in their head that were never before possible that are now entirely plausible.
One question that I want to end on, I talk to a lot of faith-based leaders who are wrestling with AI from a different context, that context of what does it mean to use a tool that could replace humanity or could be elevate in a way that tech was never meant to be elevated. And my premise has been, I want you to push back on this, AI, no matter, it will forever be a synthesis. It will be a synthetic of what it is given. It will not have its own, it's not an image bearer, if you believe theologically in creation, God. AI will never be that. It will be a synthetic of what we put into it. Therefore, there's a role, there's an agency, there's a contribution that we have as humans that AI can never replace. Yes or no? Agree, disagree, push back on that.
Yeah, entirely. I mean, we have agency in this. AI is a mirror to humanity, and I think that becomes a moral imperative to push our way to the front of that mirror. But it's also a technology, and like any other technology that can amplify good or bad, it becomes a question of what do you think will win out? And any conversation about the future of AI rests in how much faith do you have in the human race? And if you're going to just sit and watch it, or are you going to participate in that, whether it's the printing press or the internet or any other type of invention, it's up to us and how we shape that.
For more stories from experts in the industry and to learn how to take your nonprofit into the future, like this video, subscribe to our channel and podcast, and visit makehistoric.com/insights. Thank you so much for listening. I'm Ted Vaughn, and this is Future Nonprofit.